Rockets from Gaza Strip hit Israel. 4 die at board. Gaza City, Gaza Strip. U-5 rockets were fired from the Gaza Strip into Israel early Sunday, the Israeli military announced, following a day of mass protests that saw Israeli troops kill 4 Palestinians near the territory's border. The rocket attack threatens to undermine Egyptian-mediated efforts to cement a deal that the Gaza Strip's Hamas rulers hope will ease a crippling Israeli-Egyptian blockage of the crowded territory. No casualties were reported and no Palestinian group claimed responsibility for the rockets, though they appeared to be in retaliation for the deaths of the protesters. Tens of thousands of Palestinians rallied in the Gaza Strip on Saturday to mark the anniversary of their mass protests along the Israeli border. Most demonstrators kept their distance from the border, though small crowds of activists approached the perimeter fence and threw stones and explosives toward Israeli troops on the other side. The forces responded. Hamas had pledged to keep the crowds a safe distance from the fence to avoid inflaming the political atmosphere during negotiations of a possible easing of the blockade. Hamas officials say that Israel is offering a package of economic incentives in exchange for calm along the volatile border. Khalil al-Hayya, a senior Hamas official, said the group had received positive. Saturday's protest came at a sensitive time, with Israel and Hamas, bitter enemies that have fought 3 wars and dozens of smaller skirmishes, both having a strong interest in keeping things quiet. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu is seeking his 4th consecutive term in April 9th elections, but is facing a serious challenge from a group of ex-army chiefs who have criticized what they say is his failed Gaza policy. With a lack of alternative in the final stretch of the campaign, Netanyahu needs to keep the Israel-Gaza frontier quiet, without seeming to make concessions to Hamas. Netanyahu took. Hamas, meanwhile, faces growing unrest in Gaza as a result of worsening conditions after more than a decade of an Israeli-Egyptian blockade. The two countries, the blockade has helped drive unemployment over 50%, led to chronic power outages and made it extremely difficult for Gazans to travel out of the territory. Earlier this month, Hamas violently suppressed several days of public protests, staged under the slogan "We." Speaking on the group's Al-Aqsa TV station, Hamas top leader in Gaza, Yahya Sinwar, praised the protesters. With his use of the protesters' slogan appeared to be aimed at diverting the recent criticism of his group. Hamas blames the fence protests, which began exactly a year ago, have been aimed in large part at breaking the Israeli-Egyptian blockade on Gaza, but haven't delivered major improvements. Saturday's demonstrations were held at 5 rallying points along the border with Israel. Dozens of volunteers, but as the crowds swelled throughout the afternoon in response to Hamas calls for a large turnout, dozens of protesters approached the fence, unfurling Palestinian flags and throwing rocks and explosives toward Israeli soldiers. The Israeli military estimated 40,000 Palestinians were gathered at the marches. In a statement, Prime Minister Netanyahu praised the army's preparation and performance in maintaining calm. Gaza's health ministry said that a 17-year-old protester died immediately after being shot in the face in East Gaza City. In the evening, a third teenager, also aged 17, succumbed to his wounds and died in the late evening. While bloodshed was not avoided, it was far less than previous high-profile protests. Over 60 people. As Saturday's protest was winding down, organizers vowed to continue the marches and said they would gather again as usual next Friday. The military released video footage showing large crowds of protesters gathered near the fence and hurling objects. In one scene, a group of activists went up to the fence and hurled stones at the other side. In another scene, the army also said it caught 2 young Palestinian children who had tried to cross the border with a knife. The children were Earlier on Saturday, Gaza health officials said Israeli troops shot and killed a 21-year-old Palestinian man near the perimeter fence, hours before the mass rally. The army said about 200 Palestinians rioted. The marches were initially organized by grassroots activists who were calling for a mass return to ancestral homes in what is now Israel. Hamas quickly took the lead in the protests, using the gatherings to call for an easing of the blockade. The border marches routinely ended in confrontations, with some of the Palestinian demonstrators burning tires, hurling fire bombs or setting off explosives, and Israeli troops firing live rounds and tear gas. According to a Gaza rights group, an account by the Associated Press, 196 Palestinians were killed in the demonstrations over the past year, including 41 minors, and thousands were wounded by live fire. An Israeli soldier. Israel says the army has been defending the border. The army accuses Egypt has repeatedly tried to broker a ceasefire between Israel and Hamas, stepping up efforts in recent days after a Gaza rocket struck a house in central Israel earlier this week, injuring 7 Israelis and threatening renewed escalation. Associated Press writer Isabel Debris contributed reporting from Jerusalem.
Raindrop, drop top, smoking, no cooking the hot pot. Fucking on your bitch, yeah, that. Looking up, open the park pot.